Well, to Turkey now, where protests went from being peaceful to precarious over the weekend as thousands of demonstrators clashed with police. Protests began on the last day of May when a group of people gathered to ask the government not to demolish a public park and put a shopping center in its place. Since then, the demonstrations have swelled. Over 235 protests have taken place across the country and counting. 1,700 people have been detained so far, and this protest is not slowing down anytime soon. Many are demanding that the prime minister step down. He is a democratically elected prime minister at that. They want him gone. RT Rupley producer Lizzie Phelan joined me earlier with the latest from the ground.
I'm standing now looking over Taksim Square, which has been the scene of protests for the last 7 days, which began in Gezi Park. And any hopes really by the government that this would have been over on Monday, the day that everybody goes back to work and their normal life, has definitely proven not to be the case. Just in the last hour, there was a barrage of tear gas about half a kilometre, if not a kilometre away from here, and there was so much tear gas used that it flooded the square, and people are still recovering from the effects of that. And in Beşiktaş itself, there's still ongoing clashes between protesters and police. Beşiktaş is, of course, where Dolmabahçe Palace is, where the offices of the Prime Minister Erdogan are located. And the police have released a statement saying that tonight will be the night that they finish the protests in Beşiktaş. So we're really expecting even more uglier scenes than we've seen over the last 3 days. And of course, there's also been a statement earlier today by one of the trade unions here, which has 250,000 members, that they are going to go on strike tomorrow and the day after in protest at what they say is a government crackdown on peaceful protests here across Turkey, in cities across Turkey.
And talk about the reasons for this protest. As I understand it, the Prime Minister has made numerous democratic and economic changes for the betterment of the country, but also he's made several social changes that have restricted the people. Can you talk about some of the reasons?
Well, although some people say that these are very spontaneous protests, really there's been months, if not years, if not since 10 years ago when Erdogan came into office, of underlying tensions in Turkey and the policies of the AKP government. Just in the last few months, there's been several big protests against the infamous Ergenekon trials, which are notorious in that the government has arrested and sent to prison hundreds of people, including high-ranking soldiers, journalists, trade unionists, and on top of that, there's a lot of opposition growing to the government's foreign policy in relation to what protesters say are its collaboration with the opposition in Syria. And even people who might previously have been in support of this current government are really getting fed up with the fact that there are fighters coming in from opposition fighters from Syria streaming over the borders. Of course, not long ago there was an attack in Reyhanli, in which what was previously seen as an AKP stronghold, and that really provoked a lot of opposition and people here blaming the AKP government for that attack, in that they have been openly opposing the Assad government and allowing people to come across the border. They say they're refugee camps, but people here say that they are harboring terrorists here.
And speaking of those terrorists and harboring them and the Syrian fighters, can you talk about how dangerous these protests have become over the last week?
Well, really, the only time that it seems that there's any danger is when the police show up, because behind me in Taksim Square since Saturday evening, there's been no police presence, and the protests have been essentially, it's been like a festival in Taksim Square for the last couple of days, and even the buildings around the square, they haven't been smashed up. People carry on their work as normal, and really there are no incidents of violence. It's only in places where police show up and start using their water cannons and tear gas that provokes obviously a lot of anger, and protesters hit back. So at the moment, there's a police helicopter circling over Taksim Square. So it looks as though the last couple of days of peacefulness and the kind of festive atmosphere in Taksim may be coming to a close now.
RT Reptily producer Lizzie Phelan, thank you so much for that report.